Hi, welcome back. This next lesson is on dividing decimals by whole numbers. So we're still working with the Math Florida Standard 6.ns.2.3, and the part of it that we're working on is working on fluently dividing multi-digit decimals using the standard algorithm. So what you're going to need, of course, is the usual, your composition notebook and a sharpened pencil. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and once again and start on the left side of your notebook. So you want to open up your books to the first two sets of pages that are available. Go ahead and title your page Dividing Decimals by Whole Numbers. Now we have some key vocabulary today that is really important because you're going to hear me use these words. So underneath the box is the dividend. That's really the first number that you read when you are reading about division problems. So that's the number that goes underneath the box. The divisor is the number that's on the outside of the box. That's the number that we are dividing by. So the way I remember it is the word divisor kind of sounds like divide, because the other word dividend is like a short I sound, instead of a long I sound as in divide, such as divisor. That's kind of how I remember the difference between dividend and divisor. The word quotient is the answer to a division problem. And you can see that I set up a sample division problem here, and instead of putting numbers in there, I put like where the words would be. So let's go ahead and get started with our steps. Now remember, you had to have copied this down before you go any further. So if you need to pause your video, which at many times you will need to make sure that you are doing that. So let's talk about steps. Step 1, when we're dividing whole numbers or decimals by whole numbers, we're going to divide as we normally would. Nothing changes, so you divide as we would whole numbers. So you kind of ignore the decimal just like we did with multiplying. Once we do that, step 2, we're going to slide the decimal up to the quotient line directly above where it's at in the problem. And you'll see that in our next screen where we show examples. Now in blue here on your paper, I do have if necessary. Yes, I want you to write this down, but it says if necessary, add a 0 to the dividend and continue to divide until your quotient terminates. The word terminate means that it has to end. That means no remainders. So go ahead and take a moment to pause your video and copy this down. And when you come back, I'm going to show you several examples of what all this is talking about. So on the right side of your composition notebook, we're going to go ahead and start with some examples. So we're going to start with the example 7 and 2600ths divided by 3. Now I purposely wrote it down horizontally like this because a lot of you mess this up and you put the numbers in the wrong spots. So go ahead and copy exactly what you see here. The first number that you see, the 7 and 2600ths, that's the number that goes under the box or in the house, however you guys want to call it. You basically want to raise the roof. So the 7 and 2600ths gets written underneath the box, underneath the roof, in the house, and then the 3 is your divisor because you're dividing by 3. So as we mentioned before, when you're dividing decimals by whole numbers, we're going to divide and just basically kind of pretend the decimal's not there for a moment. So if you need to, we're going to go ahead on the side of our paper, write our little reminder codes. Does McDonald's serve cheeseburgers raw? Remember the D stands for divide, M stands for multiply, S for subtract, C means check. We want to make sure that after we subtracted, our divisor doesn't fit into what we have left. B for bring down, and R means repeat. We're going to repeat the whole division process until we basically run out of numbers or our numbers terminate. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to first start by asking myself, how many times does 3 go into 7? So I'm just looking at that first number only. 3 goes into 7 2 times. Now I'm going to multiply. 2 times 3 gives me 6, and I subtracted. I get 1 left over. I'm going to check. 3 does not fit into 1, so therefore I'm going to go ahead and B for bring down. So I brought down my 2. So here you'll notice that I start all over again because to repeat, I've got to go all the way back up to divide. D for divide. 3 goes into 12 4 times. 4 times 3 gives me 12, so I'm going to write that down and subtract again. Now I got 0. Now we're not done with the problem because if you notice, we still have another digit, the 6, that's in our dividend. So we're going to bring that 6 down and repeat everything and start all over again by dividing. 3 goes into 6 2 times. So when I go ahead and write my 6 down below and subtract it, I end up getting 0. All right, so now this is where we have to place our decimal point because we're all done. This is considered a terminating number because what ends up happening is we ended up with a 0 down here. So there's a 0 down there, and there's no other numbers in our dividend. So therefore, this terminated. Now, let's not forget to add our decimal point. Oh, sorry. Let me go back. Sorry about that. And so let's not forget to write our decimal point here. What we're going to do is we're going to find where it's at in our dividend. So you see that it is, I'm going to put a little box around it right over there. Okay. And we're going to literally just slide it straight up. And we're going to put the decimal directly above it. That's it. There's no counting you don't have to do any counting of decimal places in this lesson at all. You truly just line up your decimal, slide it all the way up. Now, the process for dividing decimals by decimals is a little different in the beginning. But right now, this lesson is dividing decimals by whole numbers. All right. So I want to try another example with you. In this one, we're going to do 12 and 2600ths divided by 15. This is going to be an example of one that does not terminate. So basically that means that we're going to end up having a remainder. However, since we're starting to work with decimals now, we can no longer write like R for remainder. We actually have to keep annexing zeros. If you remember from our previous lessons, the word annex means to add. So we're going to be adding zeros to the dividend until our number either terminates or keeps going. And I already told you this one's not going to terminate. So one that doesn't terminate, which means one that does not end and keeps going, is called a repeating decimal. And that is the example that we're going to be working with on this one. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to recopy this problem so that the 12 and 2600ths goes under the roof of the house. And we're dividing it by 15. So we're going to go ahead and start dividing like normal. Now, I know it's not easy dividing by 2-digit numbers, and even for me, I still have to kind of doodle off to the side to figure out, okay, about how many times does 15 go into 122? Like, I do think of these, and sometimes it does require us to kind of guess and check. Like, you're going to guess a number, check it, and if it doesn't work, it's going to mean that we need to erase. So to get started, I'm going to start with 15 goes into 122 8 times. Now, I want you to pay attention to where I wrote the 8. I wrote the 8 above that second 2. Now, had I written the 8 above the 1, then I would be saying that 15 goes into 1 8 times, and that does not happen. If I wrote it over the first 2, so if I had written it over this 2 right here, then I would be saying that 15 goes into 12 8 times. Well, that's not happening either. So therefore, I know that 15 will go into the number 122 8 times. So now I did 8 times 15. I got 120. And I'm going to go ahead and subtract. I get 2 left over. So I'm going to check it. 15 does not go into 2. I'm going to bring down my 6. And now I get 26, and I start all over by dividing. 15 goes into 26 only one time. 1 times 15 is 15. When I subtract, I get 11. Now, what you'll notice here is we no longer have any numbers at all over here in our dividend to bring down. So this is the part where I was telling you where way back in your good old-fashioned 4th and 5th grade years, you would put an R and an 11, so 81, remainder 11. We no longer are going to use that letter R for remainder. In fact, you're never going to use it probably for the rest of your life, okay? Because you need to let me know what the value of this number is or what this problem is. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a 0, and we said that's called annexing a 0. So notice where I wrote the 0 in the dividend, which is under the box next to the 6. I'm going to bring that guy down. And now I'm going to start dividing again. 15 goes into 110 7 times. 7 times 15 gives me 105. I subtracted. I got 5. Now I had to add another 0 and bring it down. Now, I went ahead and said that 15 goes into 45 3 times. 3 times 15, I'm sorry, 15 goes into 50 3 times. 3 times 15 gives you 45. When I subtract, I get 5 left over. Now, if I add, continue and add another 0 to this problem, you're going to notice over here that I basically have now just created another 50. This is where we have the other 50. So I could say that 15 goes into 50 3 times. But then when I do 3 times 15, I get 45. And let me just show you what I'm talking about here. So 3 times 15 gives me 45. I subtract, I get 5. If I keep adding a 0, annexing that 0, that 3 is going to go on forever and ever and ever and ever, and it's never going to end. So this is called a repeating decimal. So let me tell you how this is going to work. Before we go any further, let's go ahead and remember to slide our decimal point up from our quotient, from our dividend into our quotient. So no matter what, that's where your decimal is going. It's going to be decimal point 817.3, and then that 3 is what keeps repeating. So only since the 3 repeats, what you would do is you would give me a repeating bar, and you would write it only above the number or numbers that repeat. In this case, it's just the 3 that repeats. So the way that you would list this answer would be decimal point, and usually we're going to write a 0 in front of our decimals. Decimal point 0.8173, and since only the 3 is repeating, we're going to put a repeating bar just over that 3. Okay, so I know this is going to take a lot of practice and a lot of getting used to. So now it's going to actually be, yep, it's your turn to give it a try. So I would like for you to go ahead and try the self-quiz. Now, once again, that self-quiz is located on Canvas directly underneath the link that you clicked for this video. Now I know it's going to require some extra practice for some of you just with continuing with a division, but if you really think about it, when you're dividing like normal, and you seriously just slide that decimal point up. If you're still a little concerned or worried about when to annex zeros and repeating and terminating decimals, don't worry, we're going to keep working with this concept in the next couple of lessons. All right, guys, that's it for now. Come in ready to go with your self-quiz ready and finished.